Dragon Riders, Kaze no Kaeru, by Night Dragon Zero. Chris's perspective. I looked my opponent right in the eye. The Scizor stood ready, watching my every move. It was a rather large risk on his part, challenging me like this, in front of his swarm. Lose, and he'd be forever dishonored. Unfortunately, him losing wasn't much of my concern. Keeping my head on my shoulders was more of the utmost priority. Knowing I lacked experience in fighting as a Pokemon, I assumed a defensive stance and waited for him to make the first move. He finally broke the stare down, attacking with blinding speed. Reacting swiftly, I sidestepped and slashed at him. The Steel Warrior was able to twist his claws enough to block my attack. The force of the impact pushed us apart. Roaring, we clashed again, with similar results. Unfortunately, it was hurting me much more than him. Additionally, I still had the scars from the previous fight. Deciding that a frontal assault wasn't effective, the Scizor used agility to try and get in a side attack. My response was to use Double Team, creating several images of myself to confuse him. The ploy did have him attack empty air in confusion. I rushed in for what I thought would be a free hit. However, I'd underestimated my opponent. Apparently, I'd moved in a slightly different manner from my copies, and he'd picked that up, probably through his years of experience. A Metal Claw got me right under the chin. I staggered backwards, and I was immediately bombarded by a vicious series of attacks. It was a furious claw-to-blade fight, but my stamina fell short in the end. I was smacked against a tree and had the Scizor's claw around my neck before I could do so much as blink. In desperation, I swatted at him with my blades. That only caused him to tighten his grip, cutting off my air supply. As my face was beginning to go blue from the lack of oxygen, I saw him raising his other claw. The sharp cutting edge gleamed in the sunlight. Horrified, I wondered if he was going to quickly take my head off or slowly dismember me and watch me bleed to death. Then I heard the cry of another Scyther. Though I was quite dazzled, it seemed like a warning cry to me. Immediately, the Scizor dropped me, and the entire swarm disappeared just as quickly. They must have had sentries, I thought, and they'd spotted something. I've got to get out of here! Weakened though I was, I forced myself up upon my feet. No sooner had I done that, when a cloud of foul-smelling green gas covered the area. It was made even worse by my enhanced sense of smell. I stumbled about blindly, coughing and gasping. I felt a prick in my side, and then two more. I'd been shot by tranquilizer darts! Almost immediately, my feet gave way. I collapsed, unable to move my weary body anymore. My senses were failing, but I could still hear shouting. Humans! And some Pokemon. A man walked in front of me. Even with my vision terribly blurred, I could still see the black-colored uniform, and the red-colored alphabet printed on his front. I was hoping against hope it wasn't what I thought it was, but fate had not been so kind to me. No! No! This can't be... Had I been spared from one death, only to face another? My world was fading out, and the last thing I felt was the Pokeball being thrown against my back. Night Slice's perspective. This was it? I asked. The other Pokemon nodded. I was looking at the charred remains of a tree that had most certainly been struck by lightning. Fortunately, Jolteon had both a good sense of smell and a good memory. He brought us the last place they clearly remembered Chris with him. Chris! Chris, please answer me! Riptide shook his head, as if to tell me it wasn't working. Jolteon had been sniffing around for clues, and suddenly came up with a weird expression on his face. I got her scent, but it doesn't seem right, he muttered. Keeps on changing. Can you follow it? I asked. I'd gotten a very bad feeling about the scent not right part. The electric Pokemon leapt over a fallen log and carefully treaded down the slope. As we followed, something caught my eye. It was a piece of cloth, and a tattered one too. I grabbed it and turned it over several times, noting that it had been apparently ripped and torn off. It looked a lot like Chris's shirt, though I wasn't sure. Jolteon, here. I held the rag out to him. It's got that scent again, but I can barely recognize it as Chris's now, he muttered, having trouble comprehending the situation. Some marks of the dirt came to my attention. From personal experience, I clearly recognized the pair of long, single lines as Scyther claw marks. The Scyther seemed to have been sliding down the slope, dragging its claws in the dirt. Several chopped shrubs and short plants also hinted of this. Does it resemble my scent? I mean, the Scyther me, that is, I finally asked. From the look on his face, Jolteon's answer was yes. As I'd already done so, Jolteon and the others had just put two and two together. Chris, She'd become a scyther, just like I'd become human. I was beginning to wonder whether it had anything to do with Euphoria's deal, but the time for debating that would have to wait. Chris! I took off running, stumbling more times than desirable, grasping onto tree limbs and anything else that would get my balance back. At the bottom of the slope lay a small grassy area beside a stream. It seemed like a peaceful spot, but only to the untrained eye. What I saw was a battlefield. Grass trampled, twigs snapped and scattered, plants bent at unnatural angles. It couldn't have been more than 20 minutes ago, I estimated. Over here! Called Jolteon. He was sniffing at a spot at a nearby tree. Chris was here, and so was a whole bunch of other Scyther. That wild Scyther swarm, I realized, shuddering at the memory of my own encounter with them. I noticed the blade-shaped impressions in the grass too, indicating that Chris had been lying there, probably been knocked out. There were some humans and other Pokemon too, Jolteon said grimly. Chris's trail stops here, but theirs goes off along that path. He pointed with his nose. Hey guys, look at this! Ivysaur retrieved a partially buried, shiny object with his vines. Riptide took it in his webbed hands and examined it. Even from my distance, I could tell that it was a bullet or a dart of some sort. A tranquilizer dart, the Psychic Duck muttered, with the R symbol on it. Team Rocket. This scenario hit me all at once. Chris, confused and alone, having suddenly been attacked by a horde of Scyther, and then attacked by Team Rocket after that. Chris! Losing all sense of rational thinking, I dashed off in the direction Jolteon had pointed to. If those bastards dare lay a finger on her, I'm gonna hunt down every last one of them and rip their guts out. I ran till my lungs burned and my muscles ached. I realized I'd run back onto the beach, splashing into the waves. My body finally gave way, and Jolteon pulled me back to the shore. The other two were nowhere in sight, presumably still back in the forest. Desperately, I stared out across the ocean. It seemed strangely empty, without a single boat or any vehicles in sight. The trail stops here, Jolteon said slowly. I'd known it. My instincts had told me so. I just couldn't bring myself to admit it. Chris! Chris! I screamed out over and over again. My voice fell across nothing but empty ocean. God damn it! Why? Why? Why do you do this to me? I don't really want to go into the detail about every curse and swear word I was spitting out, but I kept up like a madman until my voice was hoarse and my strength was absolutely drained. Eventually, I collapsed to my knees, throwing off my sunglasses, weeping in pure despair and anger. I felt Jolteon brush up against my face and attempted to wipe my tears away with his paws, even though he was crying too. My world had simply been shattered. Firestorm's perspective. Damn, this is a really bad time to get sick. Ugh. I was close to puking my guts out. The wave of nausea hit me really hard, and I coughed again, unintentionally spewing out flames. You doing all right? Dracia asked, coming up behind me. No, I groaned. Although the trainer didn't look too good himself, Jade was running around packing up our equipment. Chris had just disappeared with 3 of her Pokemon, leaving practically all of her equipment here, including her cell phone and laptop, meaning that we had absolutely no way to contact her. Wartortle, Chris's last remaining Pokemon besides me, had gone out with Jade's Electabuzz and Ponyta. Airgriz and Mirage, as their names had been respectively, the latter of whom had been acquired in a trade for his Magmar. The trio had returned and given negative responses. Really? Nothing? Jade had asked again. They disappointedly shook their heads. You guys did your best, but I'm sure Chris can take care of herself, Jade reassured. It may be bad news just to leave like this, but Storm's come down with something and I'm not too good myself. We'd better get medical attention soon. My heart sank, feeling utterly miserable at myself. Dracia snuggled her head against my shoulder in an attempt to cheer me up. Storm, Jade held up a Pokeball. You'd best get in. No, I replied firmly, walking over and heaving the bulk of our equipment onto my back. I'll be all right. Besides, you need me to carry these, or we won't be able to get to town before the next Ice Age. Jade knew better than to argue with me, and acknowledged with a nod. But don't say I didn't warn you, he called as an afterthought. After climbing onto his Ponyta's back, we set off. Chris, please be safe, I prayed silently. Riptide, Jolteon, Ivysaur, watch out for her, okay?